The Uber dropped me at the curb of our two-story colonial at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours later than I'd planned, due to flight delays from Frankfurt. 15 months in Afghanistan, coordinating intelligence operations in Kandahar province, and I was finally home. The house was dark except for the porch light Sarah had always left on during my deployments. I paid the driver quietly, shouldered my duffel bag, and walked up the familiar brick pathway, key ready for a homecoming I'd been anticipating for weeks. The front door opened soundlessly. Sarah had fixed the creaky hinge while I was gone, something she'd mentioned during one of our video calls. I set my bag down in the entryway, listened for sounds of movement, and climbed the stairs toward our bedroom, expecting to find my wife of 9 years sleeping peacefully, unaware of my early arrival. What I found instead was a man I'd never seen before, lying unconscious in my bed, wearing only boxer shorts, with his arm draped possessively across what should have been Sarah's side of the mattress. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. The stranger was tall, athletic, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of confident sprawl across the bedsheets that suggested this wasn't his first night in my home. I stood motionless in the doorway for perhaps 30 seconds, my mind shifting from exhausted homecoming to operational assessment mode. The bathroom light was on, shower running, Sarah's voice humming something I didn't recognize. She had no idea I was home, had no idea I was standing 3 feet from her boyfriend, watching him sleep in the bed where we'd planned our future, made love, argued about starting a family that I backed silently out of the room, descended the stairs, retrieved my phone, and made 3 calls. First to my brother Marcus, asking him to pick me up immediately with no questions. Second to Walter Grayson, my attorney, leaving a voicemail requesting an urgent meeting. And third to my commanding officer, informing him I needed to extend my leave for personal matters. By the time Sarah finished her shower, I was gone, having documented the scene with photos and gathered specific items from my home office that would prove crucial in the coming weeks. What neither Sarah nor her boyfriend realized was that I had been quietly preparing for exactly this scenario for the past 6 months, ever since the communications pattern analysis had revealed what my wife thought was her perfectly hidden secret. My name is James Patterson, 36 years old, Sergeant First Class in the U.S. Army with specialization in signals intelligence and communications analysis. For the past 14 years, my job has involved intercepting, analyzing, and interpreting communication patterns to identify threats, predict behaviors, and gather actionable intelligence. These same skills that help me track enemy communications in combat zones would ultimately prove invaluable in understanding what was happening in my own marriage during my extended absence that I met Sarah Collins 10 years ago at a military appreciation barbecue in Fayetteville, North Carolina. She was 26, working as a nurse at the local hospital, with a warm personality and genuine respect for military service that felt authentic rather than performative. Our relationship developed steadily over 18 months before I proposed. Sarah understood the demands of military life, having grown up as an Army brat herself, and seemed genuinely committed to building a life that could withstand the challenges of deployments and relocations. The first 7 years of our marriage navigated typical military challenges successfully. I completed 2 overseas deployments, Iraq in 2014 and Afghanistan in 2018, while Sarah maintained her nursing career and established support networks wherever we were stationed. We bought our first home near Fort Bragg, saved aggressively for the future, and built what appeared to be a solid foundation for long-term partnership. My third deployment, which had just ended, was different from the previous 2 in several significant ways. First, the duration was longer, 15 months instead of the typical 12. Second, my role involved more sensitive operations that limited communication frequency and required enhanced operational security protocols. Third, Sarah had reached a point in her nursing career where she was considering management positions that would make relocating for my next assignment more complicated. Before deploying, Sarah and I had extensive discussions about managing this extended separation. We established communication schedules, financial arrangements, and plans for her to visit me during my mid-deployment leave. She would maintain our household, continue advancing her career, and we'd use the deployment savings to fund a major home renovation when I returned. The first 8 months proceeded according to our established patterns. Regular video calls when Operational tempo allowed, email updates about daily life, shared planning for the future. Sarah seemed to be handling the separation well, maintaining her work schedule, staying connected with our network of military spouse friends, and even starting some preliminary renovation research. The changes began subtly around month 9. Sarah's communication patterns shifted in ways that triggered my professional pattern recognition instincts. Response times to my messages increased. Video calls became less frequent and shorter in duration. Her updates about daily activities became more vague and less detailed. When I asked direct questions about specific events or timeline, her answers were sometimes inconsistent. In my intelligence work, these types of communication pattern disruptions often indicate operational security breaches or deceptive practices. While I had no specific suspicions about Sarah's activities, my training made me naturally attuned to anomalies in information flow. I began paying closer attention to the data I could observe. The first concrete indicators emerged from our shared digital accounts. Sarah had always been somewhat private about her phone and social media, which I respected as normal personal boundaries. However, our shared cloud storage, joint financial accounts, and household management systems provided legitimate oversight opportunities that revealed concerning patterns. Financial records showed unusual spending patterns, increased dining, and entertainment expenses, purchases at locations and businesses I didn't recognize, and most notably, regular charges at a high-end gym where Sarah had never previously held membership. Her location sharing, which she had always maintained for safety reasons during my deployments, became increasingly sporadic. Social media analysis revealed additional anomalies. Sarah's posting frequency about our marriage decreased dramatically, while posts about personal growth and finding happiness increased. Photo metadata showed images taken at locations she hadn't mentioned during our conversations. Most significantly, she had begun appearing in other people's social media posts with individuals I didn't recognize. 10 months into the deployment, the pattern became unmistakable. A charge for a weekend hotel stay in Asheville appeared on our joint credit card during a time when Sarah had told me she was working extra shifts at the hospital. When I called during that weekend to wish her luck with her supposedly challenging schedule, her phone went to voicemail for the entire 2-day period. Her explanation afterward was vague and defensive. At this point, my intelligence training and experience clearly indicated potential operational compromise. Whether Sarah was having an affair, planning to leave the marriage, or simply struggling with the deployment in ways she couldn't communicate directly didn't matter as much as the reality that our relationship was operating under false assumptions and my position was potentially vulnerable, rather than confront Sarah directly, which would have compromised my ability to continue monitoring the situation and gathering evidence. I began implementing protective measures. I contacted Walter Grayson, a family law attorney in Fayetteville who specialized in military divorce cases, for confidential consultation about asset protection and legal preparedness. Based on the patterns you're describing, Walter confirmed. After reviewing the financial irregularities and communication changes, there are reasonable grounds for concern about marital stability. North Carolina requires evidence of fault for advantageous divorce settlements, so documentation of any misconduct could be significant. Walter outlined several strategies for protecting my interests while I remained deployed. Most importantly, he advised me to begin systematically documenting any evidence of financial irregularities, communication inconsistencies, or other behaviors that might support claims of marital misconduct if legal proceedings became necessary. My intelligence background had inadvertently prepared me well for this type of documentation. I maintained detailed records of all financial transactions, saved copies of communications with timestamps, and began discreetly preserving evidence of the discrepancies between Sarah's reported activities and verifiable facts. 3 months before my scheduled return, the situation escalated when I discovered that Sarah had been using our joint credit card to purchase items that appeared to be gifts for someone else. Expensive cologne, men's clothing in sizes that didn't match my measurements, and restaurant charges that consistently showed parties of 2 during times when she claimed to be working alone. More concerning was the discovery that she had begun making inquiries about selling our house. Real estate websites showed she had created accounts and saved searches for smaller apartments, while simultaneously researching home values in our neighborhood. When I asked directly about any plans to move, she denied considering any changes to our living situation. 1 month before my return, I implemented the final phase of my preparation. Working with Walter's guidance, I established legal safeguards for our shared assets, documented all evidence of financial misconduct, and prepared for multiple scenarios that might unfold when I returned home. That I also made arrangements to arrive earlier than my officially announced return date, not to catch Sarah in any wrongdoing, but to observe the actual situation before she had time to modify behaviors or prepare explanations. This advance return was coordinated with my commanding officer as part of standard operational security practice for personnel in sensitive positions, which brings us to that night in November, standing in my own bedroom doorway, watching a stranger sleep in my bed while my wife showered, completely unaware that her husband had returned from war. After leaving the house and meeting my brother Marcus at a nearby 24-hour diner, I provided him with a factual briefing of what I had observed and what I knew about the situation's background. Marcus, a police detective with experience in domestic situations, advised me to proceed carefully and legally rather than confronting Sarah or her boyfriend directly. "You've got all the evidence you need," he said after reviewing the photos and documentation I had collected over recent months. "Don't compromise your legal position by doing anything emotional now." The next morning, I met with Walter Grayson to review the situation and plan appropriate legal responses. Based on the evidence of adultery and financial misconduct, North Carolina law provided several advantages for the wronged spouse in divorce proceedings, including potential claims for attorney's fees and favorable asset division. "The documentation you've provided is unusually comprehensive," Walter noted. "Most clients don't have this level of detail about their spouse's activities. Your military training has served you well in this situation." We developed a two-phase strategy. First, secure immediate legal protection for our shared assets and establish my rights to the marital home. Second, initiate divorce proceedings with claims for misconduct that would maximize my financial recovery and minimize long-term complications. That afternoon, I returned to the house during hours when I knew Sarah would be at work. I collected additional personal items, changed locks and security codes, and left a formal notice that she had 30 days to remove her personal possessions before they would be considered abandoned property. Sarah's reaction was swift and panicked. She called repeatedly, texted extensively, and eventually appeared at my temporary lodging to demand explanations. I had prepared for this confrontation and maintained strict discipline about communicating only through Walter rather than engaging in emotional discussions. "I know what you've been doing," I told her calmly during our single direct conversation. "The evidence is comprehensive and documented. My attorney will be in touch about next steps." "James, please let me explain," she pleaded, the confidence and independence she had developed during my deployment suddenly replaced by obvious fear about consequences. "It's not what you think. Derek and it just happened. I was lonely. You've been gone so much, Derek," I replied, now having a name for the stranger I'd found in my bed. "How long?" "6 months," she admitted. "But it doesn't mean anything long term. It was just comfort during a difficult time." 6 months, half of my deployment, during which she had been living a complete double life while accepting my deployment pay, my emotional support, and my trust. "Sarah, the relationship is over," I said with finality. "How we handle the legal aspects depends on your cooperation with the process." The divorce proceedings moved efficiently due to the overwhelming evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. North Carolina's fault-based divorce laws meant that Sarah's documented infidelity significantly impacted property division, spousal support considerations, and attorney fee responsibility. She was also responsible for reimbursing marital funds that had been spent on her relationship with Derek, whom I learned was a personal trainer at the gym where Sarah had been spending. Our money disappeared from the situation once legal proceedings began. Apparently, his interest in my wife diminished considerably when he realized their relationship would involve financial and legal consequences rather than simply romance funded by my deployment earnings. The final settlement awarded me the house, the majority of our shared assets, and recovery of funds Sarah had inappropriately spent during her affair. She received minimal spousal support for a limited period and was responsible for her own attorney fees. Most importantly, The process concluded quickly without extended conflict or continuing drama. 6 months after discovering Derek in my bed, the divorce was finalized, and I had begun rebuilding my life as a single person. I remained in our house, now my house, and continued my military career with a new assignment that would keep me stateside for the foreseeable future. The deployment that had ended my marriage also marked the beginning of a new chapter focused on my individual priorities and goals. Looking back on the experience, I recognized that the marriage had been deteriorating before my final deployment began. The 15 months apart simply accelerated existing problems rather than creating new ones. Sarah's affair with Derek wasn't a spontaneous mistake, but the logical conclusion of a gradual emotional withdrawal that had been developing for months. Before I deployed, the intelligence skills that revealed her deception weren't invasive surveillance, but natural application of pattern recognition to available information. The same training that helped me identify enemy communications in Afghanistan also helped me recognize when my own spouse was providing false intelligence about her activities and intentions. Most importantly, the disciplined approach to gathering evidence and implementing protective measures ensured that when the inevitable confrontation occurred, it was resolved based on documented facts rather than emotional manipulation or financial pressure. Sarah's affair ended my marriage, but my preparation ensured it didn't destroy my financial security or legal position. 1 year later, I was promoted to Master Sergeant and offered a training position that would allow me to share my intelligence expertise with the next generation of soldiers. I had begun dating again, more cautiously but with greater awareness of warning signs and red flags. The house had been renovated according to my preferences rather than our previous compromises. The experience taught me valuable lessons about maintaining operational security in personal relationships, the importance of trusting professional instincts even in emotional situations, and most significantly, about the difference between loving someone and being in a healthy partnership with them. After my third deployment, I came home to a stranger sleeping in my bed, a discovery that ended my marriage but began a period of personal growth and renewed focus on building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication. The stranger in my bed wasn't the real surprise. The real revelation was how completely I had misjudged the person I thought I knew best. The skills that made me effective in military intelligence, pattern recognition, evidence gathering, strategic planning, and disciplined execution proved equally valuable in protecting myself during the most challenging personal crisis of my life. Sometimes the same training that keeps you alive in combat zones can also save you from destruction in domestic situations. Today, settled in my home, with a successful military career and growing personal relationships built on transparency rather than deception, I'm grateful for the difficult lessons learned during that deployment. Not because betrayal makes us stronger, but because responding to it with clarity and principle provides a foundation for building something better, both in military service and in civilian life beyond it.